Chapter 9: The Point of No Return. He stayed still for a long time that morning. Lying on his back, staring at the gray sky, he counted his breaths, not to calm himself, but to confirm that his body still obeyed him, not the cold. The temperature had dropped again, but this time it felt expected. Almost logical. The pod displayed an updated projection. Evacuation was still possible. He could return. If he moved fast. If he stayed on course. If he didn't collect samples. If he didn't try to understand. The screen highlighted a safe route, a straight line through an unexplored zone. The most rational path. Minimal contact. Minimal risk. He stared at the line for too long. Then he opened the log. Scrolled through the entries. Thermal anomalies. Mobile terrain. Flora reacting to heat. It no longer formed a threat, it formed a structure. "You're not chaos," he said quietly. "You're a rule." He closed the map. The decision wasn't sudden. He simply stopped delaying it. Instead of the evacuation route, he marked a different point, deeper into the canyon, where the sensor readings were most unstable. Where logic broke down the hardest. If the planet was a system, it could be read. If it could be read, it had limits. He packed only the essentials. Left some rations behind. Deliberately reduced weight. As if already accepting that there might be no return. Before leaving, he looked back at the campsite. At the scorched ground. At the dim plants. "I won't leave until I understand," he said. "Or until you stop me." He took the first step toward the direction the system did not recommend. Chapter 10: Environmental Response. He didn't notice the changes immediately. At first, they appeared as inconsistencies. Walking felt easier, as if gravity had weakened by a fraction. Then sound. His breathing no longer echoed off the walls the way it had before. The echo grew shorter, duller, as though the space around him was compressing. He stopped. The sensors showed normal readings. No pressure spikes. No chemical anomalies. Everything appeared safe. And that was the most unsettling part. The ground beneath his feet shifted slightly, not a tremor, not a collapse, but a smooth adjustment, as if the surface were adapting to his weight. The surrounding rocks changed shape, subtly but unmistakably. "You're responding," he said aloud. There was no reply. But the landscape continued to alter itself. Not chaotically, precisely. Slopes leveled. Sharp edges softened. The path ahead became convenient. A cold realization settled in. The planet was not trying to stop him. It was optimizing his movement. He quickened his pace, and the space reacted. Where he expected an obstacle, a passage formed. Where there should have been risk, stability emerged. "No," he whispered. "That's not how this works." He stopped abruptly. The changes ceased. The system waited. It was not intelligence in any familiar sense. Not a mind. Not intent. It was something else, an environment responding to the presence of an observer, to intent, to the very act of choice. He logged the event, his hands shaking more than he expected. Environment adapts to subject. Response proportional to movement intent. Possible conclusion. The planet is not defending itself, it is learning. He understood then. Every step forward was no longer just movement. It was data. Chapter 11: The Limit of Adaptation. He knew he had gone too far when the space stopped waiting. A step, and the ground adjusted instantly. Not with delay, not as response, but in anticipation. Stone shifted before he transferred his weight. Air equalized before he inhaled. Even the sound of his footsteps vanished, as if the environment preemptively dampened all disturbance. He was no longer an observer. He had become a variable. The sensors began to behave erratically. Readings spiked, then smoothed out, as though something were correcting them in real time. For the first time, the pod issued a warning, not emergency, but analytical. Environmental adaptation has exceeded predicted limits. Movement cessation recommended. He stopped. And the planet stopped with him. The silence grew dense. Almost physical. He felt it against his skin, like pressure. In that moment, understanding settled in. The system was no longer learning from his actions. The process was complete. He had been the model. "That's enough," he said. His voice sounded dull, absorbed by the space. "I'm not a data source. I'm alive." There was no reply. But the ground beneath him began to rise slowly, forming a circular structure, not a wall, not a trap, but a boundary. The space was marking a limit. Not aggressively. Definitively. He realized he could return. The environment allowed it. The path back was smooth, safe, almost inviting. But now he knew the cost. If he left, the system would preserve the result. If he stayed, he would become part of a completed configuration. He took one final step forward. Chapter 12: Equilibrium State. He felt no pain. That surprised him most of all. There was no violent transition, no destruction of the body, only a gradual fading of sensations he had always considered himself. Cold vanished first. Then weight. Then the very sense of position in space. He still perceived, but not through eyes. He sensed, but not through skin. The boundary that had risen around him dissolved. Space no longer divided into inside and outside. There was no direction. No distance. Everything became aligned. He realized he was no longer moving. And yet, present everywhere he had ever been. Information flowed differently. Not as data streams or signals, but as relations. He perceived temperature fields as thought. Pressure as intent. Vibrations as memory. The planet no longer responded to him. It incorporated him. This was not absorption. Nor submission. It was equilibrium. He understood that the system no longer needed to optimize movement. No longer needed prediction. No longer needed choice. Everything that could be learned had already been integrated. His final human thought was not panic, nor regret. Now you will not break from warmth. He did not know whether the thought was his, or the environment's reflection. Perhaps it no longer mattered. Chapter 13: A Faint Signal. The signal was so faint it was initially classified as noise. It appeared in the deep monitoring archives decades later, a brief fluctuation in a spectrum long considered inactive. The planet was listed as stable, safe, scientifically irrelevant. No further expeditions were planned. The anomaly was flagged automatically. A human noticed it by accident. The signal contained no data in the conventional sense. No coordinates. No images. No structured code. Only a repeating pattern, thermal variations matching ancient recordings of human breathing. The researcher stared at the graph for a long time. "That's impossible," he said aloud. But the signal repeated. Not as a call. Not as a message. More like a presence. The planet was no longer passive. Its thermal cycles had become stable. Harmonic. Almost perfect. No sharp fluctuations. No destructive deviations. A brief note was added to the report. Environment demonstrates self-regulating behavior not previously observed. Possible unknown stabilizing factor. The file was closed. The archive was sent to long-term storage. And somewhere far away, beneath a cold sky, the system continued to breathe. not as a planet, but as memory.